Hi, this is Jeff D.
Hi, my name is Gary Savard.
Check it out, Bubba Brinkman.
I am the Supreme Irreverend Dr. Randy Tyson.
Hi, this is Jody Emery.
Hi, I'm R.N. Rod.
Hi, I'm James Rand.
Hi, this is Phil Ferguson.
Hi, I'm Michael Shermer.
Hi, I'm Eli Bosnick.
Hi, this is David Silverman from American Atheists, and I took a left at the Valley.
And that was the best turn I ever made.
I know we shouldn't have to scream that we're atheists. You know, we don't have non-astrologers and all that. But with the religious people taking over the world, I mean, we can either speak up or be pushed into a corner.
I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance and you just call it faith in unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.
Coming at you from Secret Lair, Abbotsford, BC, this is Left of the Valley. My name is Kevin, and I've always wondered why hedgehogs don't want to share that foliage. Joining me as usual is a team that proposed that gambling hotlines would be better if every fifth caller was a winner.
Oh my gosh.
She said that just because nobody complains doesn't mean all parachutes are perfect. Nancy.
Yeah, because whoever doesn't get the perfect one is dead.
And his girlfriend wanted something to make him look sexy, so she got drunk. Scott.
I resemble that statement.
She likes to hold hands at the movies, but it startles strangers. Christina.
That's so mean.
And she bought powdered water, but now she doesn't know what to add to it. Kirsten.
That is something I wouldn't think through.
Yes. Guys, welcome back.
Oh, we're glad to be here.
Hope you had a good week.
We have returned.
Yes, you're back.
Yeah, we're back. It's been too long.
Yeah. Always good to have the girls back.
We're going to have a great show today. Today we're going to be talking about something a bit different. We're going to be talking to filmmaker, old friend Damien Gillis. We'll be talking about wild salmon. Because it's become an issue, and it's a big issue here on the West Coast, so we'll be talking about that.
I've been looking forward to that. It is a different topic,
Absolutely.
But it is an important one, and even though, all of our listeners are not necessarily near a coast, eventually it'll affect them as well.
Absolutely. And we've done some great shows with Damien in the past, especially when we talked, I don't know if you remember, like years ago when I said we talked about liquid natural gas with Damien Gillis, and his predictions were right on the mark. And, he knew exactly that the whole thing was going to fail, and he's pretty good. So we'll talk about him with him a bit later. But first, let's do a bit of chit-chat because the news never stops.
Nope.
Did you guys hear that Israel has ordered African refugees to leave within 3 months or face prison?
What?
No.
Yes, these are obviously refugees from Sudan and Eritrea? I'm not sure where that is, but it's close by, obviously. And if they leave, they're given $3,500 to cover their airfare. Of course, the children, the elderly, and the victims of trafficking are exempt. But thousands apparently have crossed from Egypt before Israel put up a fence. It's estimated between 25,000 asylum seekers are from Eritrea, 7,900 are from Sudan, 2,600 from other African countries.
Well,
Wow.
do you know under what circumstances they were allowed in, so that there's some justification, for them to leave within a certain, or is this? I mean, this is.
Well, some of them are refugees, and some of them, I'm sure, are illegal refugees as well. They just came into the country.
Yeah.
And Israel basically said, no, you're going back home. We don't care, But I don't know how I feel about this. I understand, and these people a lot of them are escaping misery. But at the same time, they're giving them $3,500 for them to go back.
Yeah, but back to what and back to where?
Exactly, right? Exactly. At least they're not just kicking them out, right? So I'm not exactly sure how I feel about all this.
No, I guess we need. We need
don't have enough information.
We need a little more information.
Now
on
the
that.
question is, in the article you read, it was children were exempt as well as elderly. Does that mean the parents of the children can't stay? You just have to leave your kids?
Unfortunately, this is going to be almost when you get something like that, it's a case-by-case basis, and you can't do a blanket law.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the news is not reporting on a case-by-case basis. But this is what's happening right now in Israel. So it's going to be an interesting thing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I'm surprised I hadn't read about that in the
no.
headlines.
Yeah.
I figure that would make headlines.
Did you guys hear there is a unknown object producing some short, powerful, fast radio burst 3 billion light years away?
Really?
You mean it was producing these?
Yeah.
No, it is.
No, it was.
No.
Because it's 3 billion light years away, so that was
Okay.
3 billion years ago.
Fair enough. They don't know what it is. Usually these kind of bursts are called, they're usually from neutron stars. But this one, it behaves more like a black hole. And the signal keeps repeating. Although it's only a 1 millisecond long signal, but it keeps repeating, which they find it unusual.
It's aliens.
Yes. And
Probably it's saying, stay away. Stay away. Yeah, that's right.
did you guys hear about this speech that was given at the Golden Globes by Oprah Winfrey?
I heard about it, but I haven't looked into it yet.
Oh, God. Okay.
Can we just say, Oprah, please don't run for president.
Oh, that's exactly it, right?
Just please don't.
Well, that's what Donald Trump is saying, so maybe she should run for president.
No, she just shouldn't.
Oh, Oprah's.
No,
she
shouldn't.
gave a good speech in support of the Me Too movement and all that, and it was a rousing speech. It was a good speech. Don't get me wrong. But now a whole bunch of people has people wondering about her political ambitions. She called for a, quote, brighter morning even in our darkest night, which is nice, at the Golden Globes. But now people are calling for her to run to become president.
I have no problems with her political sentiments and her sincere desire to improve conditions in the United States, but I think she can do it in a different way and let the professionals handle it.
I have huge problem with Oprah if she runs, because she is probably the biggest peddler of pseudoscience of any kind. Do you want Dr. Oz as Surgeon General? Really? Seriously?
It would be. It would definitely be a new chapter in the hilarity that has become.
Yes,
U.S. politics has become.
I don't understand why these people start thinking, oh well, she's a billionaire, she should run the country. It's like, why are people thinking this way?
She's a billionaire. She should donate money and maybe start like.
Well, she has. She has.
And you get a book, and you get a book.
Yeah.
No.
You get a law, and you get a
You get a car.
She did that once.
I know.
That's
why I don't doubt her sincerity, but her qualifications and she's not a I mean, I hate to say it. I'm trying to use the word politician in a good way. She's not a politician.
Yeah, just because you have a lot of money and a sincere way of wanting to help some people doesn't. Well, first of all, I think she's a phony, but even if she was completely sincere. Just because you have money and you're sincere doesn't mean all of a sudden you should just throw yourself into politics.
Well, and she's not initiating the gossip. Other people are saying run because it looks like she's a beacon of hope, at this point. But I doubt if she'll do it.
We have Trump as president right now, so it's understandable that people are looking at another television star and being like, oh, this television star would be better, not being like, maybe we shouldn't have a television
I have to say
celebrity.
This, Nancy brought this up. She said that she's a beacon of hope, but I mean, considering the state of U.S. politics right now,
anything
I think a herd
is a
of
beacon
baby
of
turtles
hope.
would be a beacon of hope.
Yes.
Baby turtles are so cute.
That's it. Well, they could turn into Ninja Turtles too later. But I think the message we need to send to the American public is just because you're in a situation right now that seems very dark and desperate doesn't mean you go on the first train that looks to be out of town, right? I mean, to use an old baseball analogy, he always says the first pitch go by. You don't swing at the first pitch, and that's what they're doing with Oprah. It's like, come on, it's Oprah Winfrey, for Christ's sake.
Yeah.
Well, so, as I said, I don't think she's going to run, but we'll just have to see who comes out when it's in 2020.
I think Dr. Oz as the Surgeon General would be kind of interesting.
The comments of Scott are not necessarily those of Left at the Valley. They're especially not the comments of
To our American friends, as the voice of reason from Canada, vote Oprah.
No, do not vote Oprah.
How about Arnold Schwarzenegger? He'd probably make a better case.
He would make
The Rock, okay? The Rock.
Arnold Schwarzenegger was actually not a bad governor for California. I'm pretty sure he could do a better job than Trump's doing now.
Yeah.
He actually has the experience.
But any more of this talk and I'll get in the race.
Vote Nancy. Nancy 2020.
Nancy 2020.
And you got to wear that T-shirt. I am the amazing.
That's right.
Nancy.
I am the amazing Nancy.
I might actually move to the States and get citizenship just to vote for Nancy.
Boy, I've got support already.
Totally.
Now I'm taking it seriously.
We'll be the voice of Nancy.
That's right.
I was talking to my girlfriend last night. I was saying exactly that. Even right now, if somebody came to me and said, "You know what, Kev, come work in the States and we'll offer you $100,000 a year," I probably wouldn't.
No way.
I probably wouldn't. Even though I'm making less than that, I just don't see the advantage of going to the States at all. I mean, it's really become, to me anyway, a dangerous place. And I hope it changes. But speaking of the dangerous places, did you know that apparently a lot of countries are like quote unquote shithole countries?
I was just about to talk about this.
Now, this is, of course, from our the president, Donald Trump.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
So apparently it was. We got to talk about this a bit. It was leaked that Donald Trump referred to some countries, Haiti in particular, and other African countries and all that as quote unquote shithole countries. First of all,
very presidential of him.
Oh yeah.
Well, I'm on the fence on something like this because first of all, people are saying, "Well, Donald Trump is racist." Well, duh. Duh, really? This is no big news now. Now, in history, we're in a particular time in history, right, where media is so advanced and so quick that these things come out really quickly. There was a lot of presidents that this kind of information comes out like years after they've been president.
Yeah.
And, Lyndon Johnson, for example. Nancy, you'll agree with me. Lyndon Johnson was crude as a man. He was very crude. I mean, there are stories of Lyndon Johnson having meetings while he's actually on the shitter. And the door's wide open, and he's discussing laws with people.
That's amazing.
He had a very colorful vocabulary. There's no doubt about it.
And he's discussing how big his junk is and stuff like that. This is Lyndon Johnson. But the thing is, this information came out years after he was president because...
That's just strange.
Had Twitter been there at the time of Lyndon Johnson, you would have seen these kind of same things too. So I understand Trump saying, shithole country, and I'm sure many people have said these kind of crude things about other countries as well. Oh, these idiots and whatever. These freaking Canadians or whatever.
It was behind closed doors. He was in a closed door meeting.
Exactly.
But he was in a closed door meeting in a public meeting that had to do with policy and it had to do with the government of the United States. Therefore, it really wasn't a closed door meeting in terms of privacy. He was being paid by the citizens of the United States to run the government as president, and therefore everything he does is on the record.
And it also, I think, what makes it worse is the context that he was saying it in. Because it was like, because it was like, why don't people from like Norway immigrate and not people from these countries?
I think that brings up an interesting question, and then Americans have to really seriously
Nobody
take a look
wants to move to America.
Why would someone from a Scandinavian country or Norway want to move to the United States? They have free health care in Norway. They have an excellent education system. They have a wonderful justice system.
And they have reindeer.
They're one of the top countries in the world to live in.
Mm-hmm.
Why would they ever think of immigrating to the United
States? Because America
States?
Thinks they're the best.
I'm pointing on that. Why would they ever want to leave?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
And go
Why would
anywhere?
they want to leave Norway? Norway is a wonderful place to live.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe the Americans will realize that they are not number one in the world as much as they love to believe it and love to say it.
The only thing that America is number one in, I'm sorry guys, but it's self-confidence.
Yeah, or gun.
No, I think North Korea's got that.
No, but like, no, I'm not talking about like the head person, but I mean like as a population.
As a population, yeah.
They always rank highest in self-confidence.
Yeah, so
thinking that they're the best.
Wonder why.
But nothing else.
America for the longest time has always had this line of we're number one, and to the point that they've believed their own line. Their own selling point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's become a bit dangerous for them because now they still think they're number one and somehow the rest of the world is like way behind and they still think they're the shiny beacon on top of the hill, and they're not. And it's maybe time for them to wake up to this reality.
Well, I think the danger is, and you have somebody like like Trump, who doesn't hesitate saying things that are offensive to anybody, whether it's a country he disagrees with. I mean, the man knows nothing. He just knows how to throw one epithet after another and fight battles that are in his own mind. But the danger is that the leadership of no one in either party, in the leadership in Congress, is standing up and condemning what he says and apologizing and taking the high road, which they should, for what Trump is saying and doing. They're complicit in what he is doing to undermine the democracy in the United States. And this, to me, is a bigger danger. It's almost like, and I hesitate to use this analogy because so many people do, but it's almost like the good people in Germany that stood by and watched Hitler take over Congress because of their political greed and their individual ambitions, is standing by and allowing this man to do what he needs, what he is compelled to do out of his own mental illness because they want to profit by it. And that's the danger.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And, I don't want to sound like I'm defending Trump here when he says shithole. I do think that they have for president a guy who's got no valve. He's got no switch to turn to, nice.
No
speak.
filter.
Because I know that every politician, like every person, even amongst us, right now, of course, we're watching the language, we're not swearing, but you should hear Nancy after the show is done. My God, me. She's like a total sailor.
I know. I have to put the earplugs in when we finish the
it's
show.
like, oh my God.
I think it comes down to there's a time and a place.
Exactly.
Like you don't do crazy stuff when you're at work, but you might, party and stuff. Well, except for Scott. But, you can go party on your own time, but you're not going to be partying at work.
Speak for yourself.
Well, yeah, I know.
I don't know what job you do, Scott, but
like,
I'm
there's
kind
no
of interested in
problem with
that.
having a bit of fun, but
safety guys party. Like
there's a time and a place for everything.
Yeah, exactly. So I totally agree. So the fact that he said that is not a big deal to me, and the fact that he's dumb enough not to realize he should not have said that during a meeting with other politicians is because I'm sure that even Barack Obama, although he was very eloquent, I'm pretty sure with him and Joe once in a while say, oh my God, these freaking Pakistanis, what a bunch of idiots or something like that. He must have said something like that because it's how you normally talk with people.
Yeah.
But when you get in front of the other representatives, something like that, you kind of
have to be the politician.
Putting the switch on and you use your nice voice.
Well, the other thing is that unfortunately Trump is following a pattern of behavior and statements that have gone on for a year, and it's becoming obvious. It was obvious at the beginning that the man is a racist, and so it's if someone says something in private, that's one thing, but to just offend all of the countries that we're trying to establish relationships with, they're calling in their ambassadors and saying, excuse me, you're representing the United States. Exactly what is it that the United States is representing these days?
This is interesting. What was the speech? There was a speech that was given long ago in the United States history where it was, bring us your poor, bring us your...
no, this was written on the Statue of Liberty.
Yeah, that's on the. But that was an actual speech, was it not?
The French put that on the.
They put that on there. So it's interesting that the United States, for how long has the Statue of Liberty been in?
That's a good question.
Since I think it's.
You were part of the crew that installed it.
Yeah, I think it's around 1911, 12. I don't. I'm really unsure.
So 100 years. 100 years. The United States has had this immigration policy. Where it's, hey, everybody, this is the shining beacon of hope. Come to the United States. Yeah. Bring, if you're poor, you have opportunity here. And in one statement, Trump has let us know exactly where the United States stands now. And it isn't what's written on that statue.
You get the impression that the United States is like that drunk person that invites you to a party, and then when they come back the next morning, say, "Who the hell are you? And how did you get here?" It's like, "Well, get out!" They were like too wasted this whole time.
I have to correct myself. I don't know whether the French put that on. I know the author of that was Emma Lazarus, and she could have been from the U.S.
This is good education right now.
That part of it I can't remember.
Yeah, Nancy was part of the crew that erected the statue.
But they live by that of immigration to the United States was how the United States built itself.
Oh, yeah.
And now Trump is turning around and in one statement, he's completely flipped that on its head and said, no, we don't want people from the shithole countries. We only want the good people to come.
Yeah, exactly. And then after World War II, since he was from Germany and considered that an asshole, people considered that an ass. He told people that he and his family were really from Sweden.
And I was posting on the social media this week when they were talking about this shithole. I said, have you seen places like Detroit? Talk about shithole.
You want to talk about a shithole?
You want to talk about ghetto? There's tons of Flint, Michigan. You want to talk about
Flint,
sorry,
not Flynn.
Flint, Michigan. Where they still have the poison water. You want to talk about shithole?
Yeah. Look at your own country.
Take a good look at your country. LA and New York are not the only two things.
Let's talk about what's the island that still doesn't have power?
Puerto Rico.
That's right. See, we don't even remember the name of it because it's they push it right to the background.
Yeah,
so Puerto Rico's an American. What do they call
colony?
That? No.
Oh,
it's a
territory.
It's an American territory, and they've basically because Puerto Rico's basically a very poor territory. Oh, don't worry. Just oh my God! Why do we even deal with them? Why can't they just fall into the ocean?
Where's their president? I love how Trump was like, I'm going to meet the Puerto Rican president. It's like, you are the Puerto Rican president.
Like, have you looked in a mirror lately?
No, I don't think he has.
Maybe he should.
It'd probably crack.
It makes me sad. It really does. Not Trump, just the general state of affairs. It makes me sad.
Yes, in the U.S.
The U.S. used to be the greatest country in the world, and they have fallen so far.
It will. There's a pendulum. It will start turning.
I hope you're right.
Hopefully, the midterms will start. It has to turn. It really does. If it's an aberration, really, in terms of the process of democracy in the United States. The problem is how much damage is going to have to be taken care of. Well, after this guy's out of office.
I think right now what the States is going through with Trump is such a test for democracy. And a country that's had democracy working for like 100 years to have this authoritarian personality come in and see if that democracy can withstand him.
Yeah. I think unfortunately most Americans have a tendency to like authoritarian figures like that. So anyway, come to Canada. We have stronger beer and hockey.
Poutine. We have poutine.
And hockey is just way better than baseball.
And Tim Hortons.
Better coffee. That's right.
All right, my dear Nancy, are you ready for another top 10?
I am, and I'm going to give you guys a choice. I began to think that with this awful weather, that the rain and the ice and the cold,
freezing rain.
Yeah, Canadians who can, like to leave and go to a warmer climate someplace. So I began to think, well, maybe it would be fun to do a top 10 on the 10 warmest countries to go to, countries that will really, give you the sun and the feeling of warmth that you want. And then I thought, well, should we do a top 10 having to do with the vacation destinations, or should we do a top 10 having to do with the hottest places in the world? So I'll let you guys choose. You want to do vacation destination top 10 or the hottest countries in the world top 10?
I vote vacation. Because you know what? We could all use a vacation right now.
Okay. Well, goodbye, hot countries.
I want honeymoon options.
Save that one, Nancy. Save that one.
Now, because everybody usually thinks of Mazatlan, I looked for top 10s that were alternatives to Mazatlan, and so the top 10 comes from Conte Nast, which is a travel site that most people are familiar with, so it's a legitimate.
Is this a top 10 like destination Canadians like, or top 10 destination?
Top 10. I think that if Canadians would like it because they want to go someplace warm, I think it would be like North America.
Because Canadians are much bigger travelers than the U.S.
Yeah.
Americans don't travel very much. Mm-hmm. They travel within the U.S., but outside the U.S. they don't.
Yeah, no, these are sites that would be in definitely on a radar for Canadians. So we'll start with number 10, which is Rajasthan. How do you
Rajasthan?
say? Yeah, it's in India. It's in Jaipur, part of India. We have a lot of people who come from India and in Canada. So that's the number 10 favorite, not a favorite, but it's a place that people really should consider, and it's becoming in the top 10.
Okay.
It's the state is called the India State of Princes, and it's spectacular in January. Warm, the crowds have vanished, and you can dance through all the palaces, and you can have a lot of treasures there in looking at the scenery, which is supposed to be wonderful. And January provides a perfect weather for Arabian Nights style safari in one of the other close by states, where you can traverse the desert on the back of a camel and sleep under the stars. So that's a destination for people to consider. It's supposed to be very warm and very beautiful.
How warm is it? Does it say?
How warm? No, it doesn't say how warm it is. But
I have a certain tolerance of warmth.
Anything above 20 Celsius, I'm like, yeah, okay.
I would say probably in the Celsius, probably in the high 20s, somewhere through
That's
there.
not too bad.
And then, of course, number 9, we have to include Mexico. But
really, that's only number 9?
Number 9.
That would be higher.
There's a place in Mexico that is called Tulum, Tulum. Mm-hmm. Has anyone heard of that?
Nope.
This is supposed to be a really great destination. It's on the coast, and everything is light and color. It's warm. It's exuberant people. There are parties on the beach, yoga under the trees. There's a lot of little islands close by, and it's off the tip of the Yucatan Peninsula.
Yes.
So you've heard of it.
I've been there, actually.
Yeah. There are resorts that are near the Riviera Maya for colonial Mexico, and over on the west coast, there's another place called Sayulita. I'm going to murder everything. Anyway, it's supposed to be really, really wonderful in this time of year. Number 8 to consider is Bruges in Belgium. And this is a beautiful little Belgium city, and it's supposed to be one of the rare places that is just as enticing in midwinter as in the summer. It's very pretty in the snow. And the snow is an excellent excuse for holing up in a really wonderful place where you can sit by the fire. But it's supposed to be really gorgeous there. A lot of taverns, a lot of Belgian beer.
Nancy used to be a travel agent.
Yeah. Guest houses, canals, candlelit bars, restaurants, lots of wonderful food, and you can go on a long weekend and see everything. So these are top 10 places that we're not really used to hearing, but they're in the world where maybe people should explore a little more. Okay, number 7, South Africa. And it's called Clifton Beach in South Africa. Has anyone heard of that? There are a lot of reasons to go there. Food, wine, beaches, hotels, sensational scenery. It's on the Western Cape, complete with wildlife encounters on safari, staying at lodges. You can go along the coastline, and there's supposed to be a lot of really great villas. January is one of the best months for all of those things. Good wine, and you don't. It's a place where there's a lot of things that people aren't used to thinking about in terms of South Africa.
And there's
so
probably
that's on
penguins.
That's a great way to charge.
Yeah. Number 6 is Thailand. Thailand is heavenly in January. It's peak season.
Very popular around here.
Very popular. Bangkok is about as pleasant as it's going to get. So that's a place that, Thailand is becoming a really big tourist destination.
Totally is.
Yeah, and January is a wonderful time to think about that. Belize is number 5. Hot and humid, and it rains a lot.
Oh, yes.
They have some tropical storms, but it's a perfect Caribbean escape for those who like rough and palm fringed around the edges, and there's some jungly highlands, Mayan ruins. So that's what attracts people.
Yeah, that would attract people.
Belize is supposed to be a really beautiful place to
go. Number 4, Australia's Gold Coast. That's supposed to be great. Sydney throws possibly the best New Year's Day party in the world, and still going on in the month of January.
Doesn't everything in Australia want to kill you?
Yeah, you can go up the Gold Coast to Byron
everything
Bay.
does, but they're just really rare.
Yeah, so that's supposed to be wonderful. Number 3, Burma. Burma, and that's considered to be number 3 of the top 10 places to go in January. January is the best month. Very little rain, lots of sunshine, lots of heat, and they have pagodas and temples and misty mountains, and it's where the Himalayas begin. So it's supposed to be really, really wonderful. So that's great. Number 2 to consider is the coast of Brazil.
Carnival.
Yeah. So Rio de Janeiro, Sao Paulo.
Blame it on Rio.
Yeah, there you go. It's supposed to be a lot of bikini
All right,
beaches. There you
Scantily
go.
clad ladies.
Yeah, golden sand,
Down, boys.
shadows, palm trees, turquoise waters. Supposed to be wonderful. And the first place to go on holidays. Anybody want to guess? This is really
You got that smirk. You're gonna see Canada, aren't you?
Yeah, you'd think I would.
I'm gonna guess Moscow.
No, what the hell's wrong with you?
No.
Moscow?
Okay.
I'm muting his bud.
The number one destination that people really should consider is Nicaragua.
Whoa. Did not see that coming.
I didn't see that coming either.
It's a Central
Of course
American
not. You said
country.
Moscow.
No.
I was joking, Kevin.
It's supposed to be the Central American country that has everything. Tropical rainforests, untouched beaches, palm trees, volcanoes, eco-lodges, and January has the double blessing of being the month when the best temperatures are everywhere and the least rain falls. So you can go to Managua, Nicaragua, and that's supposed to be the number one destination. So where would you guys go? No, that's
anywhere that it's raining.
Any place where it isn't raining.
No. Where it is raining.
Oh, where it is raining. Well, you might as well stay home.
It's, no, not freezing rain.
Oh, cold. Like, where would you go that's that tropical?
If it's wet,
I want
green,
tropical.
trees,
I don't want heat.
and horses.
I need cold.
Okay.
I'm Canadian.
Yeah, okay.
But no, there's something about I agree.
I don't
there's
like
something
heat.
about being in a tropical location, jungle maybe, where the rain is falling and it's like 27 degrees Celsius and 100% humidity.
No.
Oh,
That sounds
I don't
horrible.
do humidity.
Sounds like a sauna.
Also, do you want to know what they have in abundance in tropical locations?
Mosquitoes.
Ants.
Oh, and ants.
Oh, yes.
Of all kinds.
I am
And
terrified
mosquitoes.
of ants.
Mosquitoes with nice diseases.
Yeah,
It's
no,
malaria.
I don't do mosquitoes.
I'll stick with the far north hemisphere.
See, it depends on what kind of
Oh, and a lot of
traveler you are.
Central America, South America, and North America are starting to get all the killer bees too, right? So
Oh, yeah.
you got that to worry about.
North hemisphere. I'll go to Iceland, guys.
Yeah,
I'll go to
that'd be a nice place.
Iceland.
Iceland sounds like an awesome band. They got the hot springs.
Heck
Actually, Reykjavik,
Geothermal
Iceland
stuff.
is on several lists.
Mm-hmm.
It depends on the interesting thing is you can go to 3 lists and the top 10 is completely different on all of those.
I want to go
So-
and stay in those like glass igloos that you can watch the north
Ice Palace?
The Northern Lights.
Northern Lights.
the Aurora Borealis.
Yeah.
It depends what kind of traveler you are. I mean, for myself, I'm not much of a beach person. If I spend one
No.
afternoon on the beach,
No.
I'm sad.
I'd rather go hiking on a mountain.
I like to explore. Right?
Yeah.
So when I went to Mexico several years ago. It was one of the best damn things I ever did because what I said to everybody, I went around Christmas time. I said to everybody, don't invite me to parties, don't buy me Christmas gifts, and I went to Mexico for Christmas.
Where did you go?
Tool.
The Mayan Riviera there.
Yeah, okay.
And we did some snorkeling, and I was exploring the pyramids of Ekbalam. It was fantastic time. And I would totally redo it again. So, but the heat, I'm a bit like Christina in that sense. If it gets to 25 to 29 degrees, which was the weather there,
That's
was
so
perfect.
gross.
Yeah.
It's about as perfect as it
If
gets.
it's not humid, 25 to 29 is just.
It was just perfect. The rest, after that, it just gets too hot.
Yeah.
So, in Celsius. In America,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how it
if
is
you
in
want
Fahrenheit
hot,
for
if you want
American
hot,
listeners.
Australia is the place to go for hot.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
You hit
Yeah.
the, you
That's
can hit
so
the desert
gross.
in Australia, and they're hitting like 43,
No,
44,
they had
47
last
degrees.
year. They had to create a new level on their
50.
scale
They hit
because it
50.
hit 50.
Oh my! It
50
hit
degrees
50?
Celsius. That's so gross.
So if you like heat, I mean,
Yeah,
Australia is the
one of
place
these
to
days
go.
I'll do the top 10 hottest places in the world.
Yeah, and to respond to your what you were saying there about Australia, about everything wanted to kill you there, I had this exact conversation with an Australian, and I asked that very question. I said, yeah, how do you feel about living in a country where you had, like deadly scorpions and deadly spiders and deadly poisonous snakes? And he looked at me and says, what are you talking about? You guys have wolves and bears and moose in your country.
They live in the forest.
Yeah, but they kind of feel the same way,
And they're
too, right?
big.
Yeah,
You can see them coming.
Except when that cougar or that bear decides to come into town.
Yeah. Or if you live in the country like I did, and then you're walking outside, and you're, that's a cougar. I should probably go inside.
Animals you know what? The average cougar's bigger
I was
than you
6.
are.
Yep.
I was 6, and there was a cougar, and I'm like, doo-doo-doo.
What bar,
Go
what
back
bar were you
inside.
at? What bar were you at?
I remember, as a kid, just walking outside with my dog, and look, 10 feet away, there's a bear.
My aunt had a bear knock on her door once.
I think we might have had the same thing.
Knock.
Wonder if it was the same bear.
I had a story
And she
relayed to
opened
me.
the door.
I had a story relayed to me about a couple of Australians from a university that were doing a study, and they went into Northern Ontario in the spring. And the people in Northern Ontario went, "Are you sure? Are you sure you want to do this?"
Mosquitoes.
And what they got was, "Mate, don't worry about us. We're fine. We're from Australia. There's nothing here that can hurt us." And I guess they're too
Challenge accepted.
Challenge accepted. Canada accepted it quite well. They lasted 2 days out of the 2 weeks, and they came running out of the bush because the bugs were so bad. They said, "You can keep Canada." the black flies, right? The black flies in Northern Ontario.
Yeah.
See, if it's they might have all of the poisonous and venomous critters down there, but we have the larger, the
moose,
the ones that rely on their strength and their intelligence, not their ability to poison you and just watch you die.
Yeah.
Well, and
there's
then
work involved in this one.
And we have copious quantities of black flies and mosquitoes from about Manitoba over to Newfoundland.
That's why I'm going to stay on the West Coast.
The black flies and mosquitoes are so bad that if you go out and you are not protected, you will be desiccated within 3 days.
I despise mosquitoes on such an incredible level.
I guess that's why it's not on the destination list.
Not on the Northern Ontario and Quebec are not on the destination.
I feel like they beeline for me in a group of people. It's terrible.
Yeah.
You're just very tasty
And
blood.
black flies are interesting.
She's a hotter run. She runs temperature wise, hot.
And
carbon dioxide.
my poor kid in Nova Scotia, used to come.
Your poor kid.
The poor kid. You'd let him outside, and 15 minutes later, he would come to the door, and there would be blood. There would be blood streaming from his skull. And you were like, "What did you do to yourself?" It was black fly bites.
No,
No, I just want to make sure the audience doesn't think that you use that poor kid as bait outside,
That's
so
right,
the
that's
black
right.
flies are
Black
going to
flies
him, and then
go
you
to
can
him,
walk
and then
out.
we would be left alone to sit and sip our rum. So
All right, let's move on.
7 in the morning.
Let's move on to what we always love to do. Another brilliant moment.
Brought to you by religion.
All right. Did you guys hear that the Supreme Court in the U.S. is refusing to hear challenges to a Mississippi law that allows businesses and government employees to deny services to the LGBT?
Are you serious?
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, America, get with the 21st century already.
No, they're on their way back to the 12th
Well,
century.
what was the final? The Supreme Court isn't hearing it. What was the final ruling by the lowest court?
Mississippi
The
has
challenge was
a law. Has a law that basically they called it the Protecting Freedom of Conscience from Government Discrimination Act.
That's right.
Oh my gosh.
Which allows state employees, corporation individuals, and healthcare providers and non-profit organizations to use religion as a justification to discriminate against nearly anyone. Same-sex couples, single mothers, divorcees, and anyone who has had sex outside of marriage.
Oh, whoa, seriously? How would they know?
Mississippi.
Yeah.
Wait a minute. So
How many people do they actually serve?
I was thinking about this, and could this actually be turned around? If the LGBT community from around the U.S. got together and pooled money and started buying businesses, could this be turned around and actually reverse discrimination so that it forced the law? Because you know damn well that if the Christians started getting discriminated against, all hell would break loose.
They already think they are.
They do.
But so Mississippi has the law, and it went to...
It went to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said...
No, before it went to the Supreme Court, where did it go?
Oh, that's a good question. The article doesn't say, unfortunately.
So you do, because it has to go, it has to go through the
different levels
the
of
circuit court.
Yeah.
It's apparently, I was reading up on this, and it went to the Supreme Court. I thought it was the Supreme Court, and they overtook. There was an injunction, or there was against the law, and the next level of court basically overturned it and said no, that injunction is not going to stand. The law stands.
Right.
And apparently, they have to. There's one more step they can go. They can go one step.
Yeah, because it would seem as though that law has been overturned, and the Supreme Court says we've got nothing else to add. We've already been there, done that. So
they put the law in, and then somebody filed an injunction against it.
Right.
One of the courts turned around and said, "You can't do that."
Right.
Now the higher court has turned around and said, "No, that judge was out of line. You can do that."
Well, it's not.
Yes, but the Supreme Court can refuse to hear it because they agree
the Supreme Court's refused to hear it. Now.
Right.
They said, we're not going to.
As it stands, the law right now promises that the state government will not punish people who refuse to provide services to people because of religious opposition to same-sex marriage, extramarital sex, or transgender people. In fact, in Mississippi, women can now be fired for wearing pants.
What?
No, I think
that is the stupidest thing.
That's going to be overturned.
Or having premarital sex under the new sweeping new religious freedom law designed to allow discrimination against the LGBT.
No, they're doing their best to say this is our stance, but it's not going to stand. It's not going to.
The way the law reads, and I didn't read what you did, Kevin. I read that it was basically the government's not going to interfere with those quasi-religious decisions. So if a business decides because of your affiliation that they don't want to serve you, the government's not going to step in and say, hey, we're going to levy fines against you. That's great. But what if the LGBT community was to start opening businesses, and when a Christian walks in, say, no, fuck you, we're not serving you?
Yeah, well, unfortunately...
that's what I'm wondering. Like, if that was to start happening, then they would have to open it up. But then they would have to open the law up. And damn well the court would side with the Christians, which would mean that if they uphold it for the Christians, they have to uphold it for the LGBT.
Well, it may be because we're getting into territory that I'm not... I can't talk about because I don't know enough. But it could be that the Supreme Court turned this down because they're hearing the Masterpiece Cake case, which has to do with discrimination, and so that it may be that's already on the docket, so that would fit under the same.
Not deal with it.
Yeah.
Well, specifically the Mississippi Supreme Court, whereas the cake case is through the American Supreme Court, so they're different Supreme Courts.
Yeah, but the federal would actually set.
It just says Supreme Court. So I think it's the state Supreme Court. I would think.
So, but with the Masterpiece Cake.
That's that
case. That will be for the whole United States.
Yeah, that's the Supreme Court of the United States.
But then a challenge could be mounted in Mississippi based on the United States Supreme Court findings. Constitutional.
It's confusing.
There's not enough information for us to really.
I say we start pooling money. We do a GoFundMe page, and we start buying business or forming businesses in Mississippi, or where is this? It's in Mississippi, and start forming businesses there, and refuse to serve Christians.
So I'm curious. Because I've actually been having this conversation with my twin sister.
Yeah, I was thinking of that too.
What do you guys think about governments having specific groups you can't discriminate against?
All groups should not be discriminated.
Well, but what I mean is, because there are groups that do get discriminated more, like based on like your religion, your sexuality. Because like in Canada, you can't discriminate against people.
Anyone.
Well, yeah.
Those are
but the thing is, you can discriminate, like, because you can like say, "Oh, I'm not going to hire you because of your criminal record." Like, there are things that you can discriminate against.
Well, okay, but a criminal record is not considered discrimination.
Exactly.
Because someone who has a criminal record
they've done
is
something.
showing that they're not trustworthy.
Mm-hmm.
And a great many jobs, like if you were a thief.
You couldn't,
and I'm
totally.
hiring you into a payroll position. Do you think I'm going to hire you into a payroll position? You're not qualified.
No. Yeah.
This is why when they say the law, they say you cannot discriminate on the basis of
there's
gender.
so
do you think like a government should put that into law?
Put what into law?
Saying that you can't discriminate against
the protected
people.
classes.
They already have it.
No, but I'm just curious.
If you were to redo the government, should they do that? Well,
Yes.
I think it depends on your population and the level of maturity. We've obviously proven ourselves not mature enough to not have a government authority impose something like that.
Because I personally 100% think
grounds,
that
and this is
government should put
grounds
that
are
in
something
place.
that you can't change about yourself.
Yeah, totally.
The fact that you're gay, you cannot change that. That is not something. You're black. You can't change the color of your skin.
Yeah.
So things that are just part of you as a human being, they are not allowed to discriminate. You've got red hair. Oh, we don't hire gingers.
They have no soul.
They're not allowed to say that.
The reason I ask is because my twin sister actually thinks that government shouldn't
she's a libertarian.
Put that into law.
But they already do. I mean, there already are anti-discrimination. So I don't understand that.
My twin sister thinks the free market. She thinks the free market should be the only thing. I know.
Yeah, and you know, and I know, right?
Yeah, like I've been having a very long conversation with her.
You should tell her to move to Honduras.
So what you need to do is bring out. Are you talking about laws in Canada or the U.S.?
Well, any government. She doesn't think any government should put.
Then you just need to show her the Constitution and say it already is.
No, but she thinks she thinks that any in a government they shouldn't do that.
Right.
But she's entitled to her opinion.
Yeah.
Kevin said
it may not be correct, but she's certainly entitled.
Kevin said it very well, and I think he was 100% right.
Damn right.
We are not mature enough as a species.
Yeah.
As people, we're not mature enough, and I think the best way of describing what your sister believes in is back when Germany was taking the Jews off to the concentration camps, and they were taking people who had physical deformities. They were taking people who had different religions. They were taking people who had whatever didn't fit their little plan was going off to the concentration camps. And there was a speech made by, there was something written by someone. I don't know if it was a poem or a speech.
Oh, it's when they came for...
First they came for the Unionists, right? Then they came for the Nationalists. Then they came for the...
But when they came for me...
Yeah, when I finally turned around, when they came for me, there was no one left to fight for me.
Exactly.
And this is what that promotes. If you don't put those laws in place to say, hey, you know what, you can't discriminate against a person for what that person is, for who they are. You cannot do that.
Well, yeah, there's things you can't control.
So the person's black, the person has red hair, the person's religion, we protect religion, and I don't think we should. Because that's a belief that the person forms, right? That it's not part of who they are, it's something that they become. And they can easily unbecome it.
Yeah.
The way I look at the religion part of that is, why would you apply for a job that goes against something you believe in your religion? That just seems kind of stupid and backwards to me.
That's true. But then you're limiting maybe somebody feels they can serve the public, whether it's a Christian or a Muslim and it doesn't matter if it was a Muslim applying for a job in a Christian place, but they can still serve the public in that capacity.
Yeah.
Hold on.
It shouldn't have to do with...
Who are you people? We're having way more discussion about something like this today than we ever have before. Who are you people?
I mean, I know...
This is serious stuff.
Well, no, I've been having a week long...
It has been an ongoing conversation.
I think it's the Trump effect.
Conversation.
The Trump effect. Wow.
It's the Trump
Nancy,
effect.
you might...
I'll blame everything on
see
Trump.
The studies from major universities about the Trump effect.
Let me move on to another story.
It would be...
we could have a whole show on this.
Clock is ticking here.
We love you, Kevin.
So,
we could do a show on this. We should.
You guys hear about Paula White?
No.
Who's Paula White?
She's a prosperity gospel minister who has often served as a spiritual advisor to Donald Trump.
Oh my gosh, yes, I have heard about this.
Well, now White is raising eyebrows with a new scheme that involves asking her followers to send her up to a full month's salary or else face consequences.
I hate these people. I hate them so much.
You know, I was thinking of crafting a letter to our audience, asking them to send us, you know, or else there will be consequences.
Hey,
send us a month's salary.
Sign up for Patreon, guys.
That's right.
I've got it. We'll do a GoFundMe. Save my soul. Send me a month of your salary. All Christians, please send me a month of your salary.
And then I'll go to
You
church.
will help save my soul. And then after a couple of months, you just say, I'm sorry, it's not working.
No. So you just have to send more.
No, I'll do one. I'll do one better. You know what? You send me a month's salary. Every Christian send me a month's salary, and I will show up to church every Sunday.
I will
do it.
I'd ask questions.
You know what? You wouldn't even have to go to work anymore. That would be worth it.
I don't know why you people have such a narrow, prejudiced view. I'll accept money from anybody. I just, you know, it really doesn't make any difference what their religion, where they come from. I'm so open-minded. Just send the money. It's all green. Send it.
Not all of it's green.
Well,
we have purple money.
Purple money, green money.
We have rainbow money.
Because it's, look, the American dollar is worth way more than our Canadian peso.
It totally
That's right.
I have an American dollar in my wallet.
Right.
Or donut buck.
Donut buck.
So Paula White basically says, quote, all first belong to God, she says. When you honor this principle, it provides a foundation and structure for God's blessing and promises in your life. It unlocks deep dimensions of spiritual truth that literally transform your life. When you apply this to everything, everything comes in divine alignment for His plan and promises to you. God needs money.
That's right.
God needs money, right?
Carlin called it, man.
Yeah.
Also, White also warns that bad things could happen to followers who don't send her money this month, because to not do so would contradict God's word.
That's right. They might get hit by a bus when they step off the curb.
Send the money to us instead.
Praise be to the almighty dollar.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It's always been the true religion of
I want to say, aren't you a little curious as to who would actually put the money in an envelope and send it to
People
her?
who are gullible and
desperate. That's the worst part. It's taking advantage of the desperate.
It's the people who are least able to give it.
You know how easy, if I didn't have a conscience, it would be for me to make money? All I would have to say is, hey, you know what? I used to be an atheist podcaster, but then I saw the light, and it was
You'd be
beautiful.
Rich. You would be absolutely rich.
I could totally make a ton of money.
Yeah, you tell how you were in the bottom of depths of despair. And
yes.
In that moment, you fell on your knees.
I was speaking the devil's word through this microphone, and I was just... Oh, I couldn't believe it.
Well,
then Jesus came.
Back in the 80s in Dallas, there used to be a televangelist whose name was Robert Tilton, and he really achieved quite a bit of fame and fortune. And I actually attended one of his services, but that's a whole other story. But he was one of those prosperity guys that said, "Put your money in a prayer request," and so he got like a ton of money and all of these prayer requests, and his downfall began when some investigative reporter, and I don't know exactly who or the circumstances, but they actually were looking in his dumpster and found all of the prayer requests in the dumpster, all open with the money removed.
Yep.
And that was the start of his downfall.
It's always been. Well, thank you so much for that, guys. We're way behind schedule, so let's go on a break.
We have a schedule?
Sort of. So let's go on break, and when we come back, we'll be with Damien Gillis, talk about the wild salmon. So stay with us. Interested in a particular topic? You ever wonder where we find all this information?
The Common Sense Canadian is a forum for critical discussion of the key issues shaping our world today: water, energy, food security, and how we manage our resources to the public benefit while preserving our environment. So go to commonsensecanadian.ca. It's uncommonly sensible.
All right, joining us on the line right now, we have our old friend Damien Gillis. He is a filmmaker extraordinaire and probably one of the best voices we ever had the pleasure of having on the show. He's a snappy dresser and a snazzy dancer. Damien, thank you so much for joining us yet again on Left of the Valley.
My pleasure, Kevin. Thank you.
Damien, today we wanted to discuss something that, that kind of flies under the radar, but here affects us a lot of people on the West Coast, from all the way here in BC, all the way down to California and even further, the plight of wild salmon. And you've been following this story very carefully.
I have for 10 years now. That's taken me all around the world. In fact, because of the interrelationship between the wild salmon and farmed salmon, which is, an industry run out of Norway, but it happens in Chile and Scotland and Ireland and Canada as well.
Yes. It's a huge industry, and you've noticed over the time when you've been investigating the industry, there's some interesting things going on with that, and you've been writing some articles lately from the to the Tyee about what's going on with the wild salmon. So maybe you can explain in our words what you've seen over the years and where you think the industry is standing right now.
Well, we know the wild salmon has been in pretty steady decline over the years, and of course there are many different runs, 5 or 6 different species depending on whether you count steelhead. And many different rivers and streams up and down the coast and into the heartland of BC. So, there are a lot of different issues going on in different places. But what I've been doing of late is really looking back through the lens of government officials who are supposed to be regulating the farm salmon industry and protecting and conserving wild fish. What I've been looking at, I've been going through hundreds of government emails and internal communication strategy documents, court documents, affidavits, and academic research, and to piece together what the industry has been doing to influence our government regulators into essentially turning a blind eye to the problems being potentially caused by the industry. So what I see in the narrative that I've reported on in the Tyee over 2 different pieces, which are on their website, the Tyee.ca, is what could, I think, be very fairly described as a captured regulator. And that is the phenomenon that we've seen it happen in the oil and gas sector and other places. It's when an industry becomes so powerful that it takes over the government regulator that's supposed to be watching it on behalf of the public and the environment. Mm-hmm. And so what we see here is a real pattern of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans and the provincial agriculture veterinary lab, which does a lot of the auditing of the health of the fish farms, really going out of their way to accommodate the industry. And when new science is happening, and using cutting-edge genomic testing methods out of the Pacific Biological Station in Nanaimo, and an institute called the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative, for a 3-year period, they were studying a disease on a salmon farm. And came to the conclusion that this disease was here in BC, despite the industry and government having maintained for years that no, it isn't. And when they came ready to publish these findings or to announce them to the public, what we see is a public relations war being waged within DFO, very much influenced by and catering to the industry, whereby they downplayed the severity of the disease in the announcement. They changed it. Instead of saying, we know that this disease is here, which these researchers were very confident, an interdisciplinary team of 8 scientists from Canada, Norway, and Scotland, all the leaders in their field, very sure that this disease is here, affecting farm fish and potentially wild fish. And yet, when the announcement was made, their higher-ups and political higher-ups within DFO made sure that the public heard that it was only a potential or possible discovery, and they went out of their way to downplay the significance of it. And this is something that has been happening for a number of years with other viruses and diseases connected to farm salmon and wild salmon. And what's clear to me is that we don't have a properly functioning federal regulator. And there's another situation that emerges kind of tied to this is a federal court order came down in 2015 telling the regulator, DFO, that they have to test the hatchery fish that come from the industry. They grow them on land to a certain point, what we call smolts, a few inches long, and then transfer them in ships and put them into these open net pen containers in the ocean. which is where the interaction happens with the viruses and diseases and parasites between farm fish and wild fish, and where the risk is. And there is a law under Section 56 of the Fishery General Regulation that says you can't transfer a fish into the ocean that has a virus or that is infected or diseased, as it may be harmful to wild salmon, and that is, a mandate of the Department of Fisheries and Oceans to protect wild salmon. So there was a discovery that one of these hatcheries was just riddled with piscine reovirus, PRV, which is the viral precursor to a disease called heart and skeletal muscular inflammation, which in Norway has killed up to 20% of the fish on particular farms in the height of a disease bloom in Norway. So we know that it can affect fish. And when this discovery was made and this evidence was presented to court, the judge, Justice Donald Rennie, ordered DFO to begin testing for this virus and disease, and to not allow the transfer of these fish into the ocean. And for 2 years, he gave them 4 months to comply, and for 2 years, the federal regulator did nothing, completely ignored a court order. And so the people that brought that case, which was salmon biologist and fish farm critic Alexandra Morton, and EcoJustice, the law firm, they filed a new suit, and that will be proceeding this year. They're just submitting evidence now, and a court date is yet to be set. But in response to this, rather than, first of all, follow the court order and the law that it's based on, and follow their constitutional responsibility to protect and conserve wild fish, DFO has gone out of its way to invent excuses here. They've reinterpreted their constitutional mandate to say, oh, we don't really need to protect all fish or an individual fish. We just need to ensure that the whole conservation unit isn't wiped out. And as long as it's not going to do that, as long as we don't believe that's going to happen, then we think it's okay. And they've also determined that basically what they're now going to do is change the law itself, which would make the judge's order, it would undermine it. It would make it moot potentially, because the law that he's basing his ruling on is no longer there. And this is really breathtaking. This isn't really coming from the minister, and the minister has been charged with, by the prime minister, listening to science, implementing the precautionary principle, following the recommendations of the Cohen inquiry into wild salmon. And so his underlings are going around trying to change laws, and it's really wholly inappropriate for our civil servants to be doing this. So okay, just to make sure that our audience gets this straight, I'm just going to do a big picture thing here. So essentially, what happened is they're doing these. They're hatching the eggs they're farming the salmon on the land in some big pools, right? And when they reach a certain age, and because of the conditions on these farms, some of these young smolts get disease, and then they put them into the water, right side by side with the wild salmon, but like in those big nets, I'm assuming, right? Yeah. And pens, and of course, these diseased fish are essentially affecting the wild stock as well. And the DFO knows about this. They have the scientific data that says this is happening, and yet they're turning a blind eye because the industry lobby is too powerful. In the big picture, that's what's happening. Now, then that's a good overview. Now, I'll just say is we don't yet really know what the impact. I mean, this science has to be done sort of in a logical sequence. There should be more resources for the science, but there is at least sufficient resources to do some of this science, and that was all directed under a federal judicial inquiry in 2012, the Cohen Commission inquiry. Yes, I remember that. Directed that more of this science be done. Okay, so this lab was set up, the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative. They went off and did some of it. They determined, okay, first of all, this disease, HSMI, is here. we then learned also that piscine reovirus causes HSMI, like HIV causes AIDS. Okay, the virus and the disease.
Okay.
We know that these viruses and diseases now exist in BC's waters. We know that the disease has had a significant impact on farmed salmon in Norway. It's been a leading cause of mortality and financial losses for them in over the past decade. We also know from a very recent study published in the respected journal PLOS One that fish with carrying PRV, wild fish with PRV, which is the viral precursor to HSMI, it's easier to test for PRV. So it could be very well that they have both the virus and the disease. But we know for sure they had the virus, and they had trouble making it to their natal streams. And we know that the percentage of fish that had PRV below Hell's Gate, which is the biggest navigational challenge on the Fraser River, was much higher than above Hell's Gate. And so what that would suggest is that just like you or I would have more trouble completing a marathon, let alone maybe, I don't know about you, but even a 10-kilometer run, if we were perfectly healthy, or I should say if we had a cold, than compared to if we were perfectly healthy. And so these salmon have a very harrowing journey, the ones that go all the way up the Fraser River and off side streams of the Fraser tributaries, and to do their spawning. And so they don't need any extra burdens on them to complete that journey. And if they can't make it, then that we call that pre-spawn mortality. And of course that means that there'll be fewer eggs hatching the following year, and it will affect wild salmon. So we have essentially, Kevin, the pieces of this puzzle keep emerging, and we're fitting them together. I can't sit here and say 100% that the big revelation would be to be able to say the Norwegian fish farm industry brought a virus here in eggs from Norway, because these are Atlantic fish that we're farming here, by the way.
Yes.
These aren't even indigenous to BC. So over the years, those eggs have been imported here, and then we've reproduced them here in hatcheries and created these smolts that go, and we're talking tens of millions every year, that are going into these large open net pen farms. We have about a little over 100 licensed tenured farms in BC. They're not all active all at the same time. And it's about a 2-year period to grow from when those smolts are put in the farm to when they grow up to be harvestable adult fish.
What's the reason for the industry to be using Atlantic salmon instead of Pacific?
They handle the process of being penned up in these. I mean, this is really unnatural, and they've just determined it. Also, the industry comes from Norway, so they started working with us, and they learned how to, perfect their methods of working with Atlantic salmon. I think that's probably part of it. But they just have determined that there have been experiments done with certainly with Chinook and some other salmon species very minimally, but they've just stuck with Atlantic salmon. And it's a big, there are many other problems with the industry, because first of all, there's several tons of waste that are being dumped through these net pens and onto the ocean floor. Their feces, which contain all sorts of nasty stuff and affect the marine environment. There are escapes of these fish. We had over 300,000 Atlantic fish that escaped from a farm in Washington State in Puget Sound in summer that made big news headlines all over the world. And those fish were found as far up the island as Campbell River, where I live and grew up, but have just recently moved back. So there are problems with these Atlantic salmon in basically insinuating themselves into the natal streams of the wild indigenous coho or sockeye or Chinook. So there's all kinds of problems here with this whole kind of grotesque experiment that's been going on for several decades. And these diseases and viruses will be out. I mean, one of the things I can't say for sure, there's been one piece of research in 2013 that suggested that the strain of piscine reovirus, PRV, came from Norway. There's more work that's being done on that. But the issue is that, and there are probably some viruses and diseases that are native to these waters, and sea lice, which has been another issue, a parasite which can affect wild fish very badly. They exist in the ocean, and anybody who goes out fishing will know they got to clean the sea lice off. There'll be a handful of them sometimes when you catch a coho or a chinook. But the problem is what you're doing is you're creating these massive incubators that are totally unnatural, and they're on the migratory routes of these wild fish. So you're taking 1 million fish in some cases in one of these farms, in these pens, and they're concentrating the virus and disease and the parasites. And then when the juvenile out-migrating wild fish swim by, who are very vulnerable to these sorts of things, they can hop off of the farms and get onto the wild fish. And so it may be even that some of these cases, the diseases came from the wild, but the wild has its own way of dealing with these things. And, the fish, they swim back to their natal stream. Sea lice don't survive in fresh water more than a day or two, so they die off and they shed them, and they're able to go back, lice-free. The adults die after they've spawned, except for some Chinook. They die, and so that breaks the cycle of disease. And then the new, alevins hatch, and they're able to re-begin that cycle without being infected. But what we're doing now is we have these 100 farms or so that are full of these, at different points, full of Atlantic farm salmon, sometimes up to 1 million fish in one pen, and they are magnifying and amplifying and concentrating and spreading these viruses and diseases and parasites to the wild fish, and that's the big concern. And regardless of whether we had, just one last point here on the science, regardless of whether we know everything, and the pieces keep coming and they keep lining up and suggesting there's a problem here. But one of the most important things that Justice Cohen directed after this $26 million exhaustive public inquiry was that we apply the precautionary principle. And that means that when there's a risk to the environment or human health, the onus is really on the industry and the regulator to prove that there isn't a problem before you do something. It's not the other way around. And that's what we've been in here. And even when good scientists do good work, they're attacked in the media. They're attacked within their own department. Their work is suppressed and stifled, and they have to fight and claw just to get this out to the public. If there's nothing wrong with the industry, they should have nothing to hide. There should be no problem with this coordinated, both public and private and secretive attack on science. And that runs very, very contrary to what Justice Cohen said and what any, I think, common sense citizen should want, which is that we allow our scientists to do their work in our interest, to the benefit of the environment, and we wait and we see what they have to say, and when the information comes out and tells us that we should be concerned about something, then we take that seriously, and that's not what's been happening here at all for the last 15 years at least.
So you do have some scientists out there on their own dime, I'm assuming. They're actually
no, they have funding from. I mean, DFO is not funding much of this science. There are other the Pacific Salmon Foundation, which is a charitable organization,
okay,
and Genome BC, which is a sort of a semi-private public lab in BC, along with DFO. The three of them created the Strategic Salmon Health Initiative, which is what's been doing the really breaking research here that I've been reporting on. But DFO is not contributing very much. They're contributing lab space and some staff, but they're not contributing a lot of money to it. And this science would benefit from having a much bigger injection of capital, of resources. But they've still been managing to do some really important work with the resources that they do have.
Well, that was my point. So these guys, they're not cranks. They're not that lone voice in the wilderness. These people actually have some credibility in what they're doing. Yet the government is ignoring their own rules and not listening to these guys at all, and not taking any precautions to even look into their work. So at least to even debunk. Let's say, for example, they're so sure of their position, they could at least go in there and debunk the position of these scientists, and yet they're not doing that.
Yeah, and let me tell you, like, the way that they've gone about sort of debunking this science in their very crass, unscientific way is they created their own diagnosis of heart and skeletal muscular inflammation, HSMI. And it's different from what the world's scientists and scientific literature use.
Whoa, that is sneaky.
Yes. So for many years, salmon farms were regulated by the province under the Ministry of Agriculture. In 2009, thanks to a lawsuit that Alexandra Morton brought, that forced it back to DFO, which is where it should have been, because they're in charge of fisheries. And they should not be, another really important point that Justice Cohen made, is they should not be both promoting the salmon farming industry and regulating and protecting wild fish. That's called a conflict of interest.
Yes.
And so this was one of the things that he urged be broken up, and that promotion of salmon farming could go to Industry Canada, which is designed to promote industry in Canada. That would be a logical fit. It shouldn't be in-house inside the same place as trying to protect an industry that might, or a species that might be very likely being impacted by this other industry. But for many years, this was being done under the province, and the auditing of the health of these fish farms was being done by the Animal Health Center in Abbotsford, and in particularly a scientist, a veterinarian by the name of Dr. Gary Marty, whose lab is now under investigation right now as we speak by the province for ethical issues that have been raised by other scientists. And that's very apt that be happening, because my research shows that there are some serious flaws in how this work is being done. And the big thing that they did, so this auditing lab works hand in hand with the industry. They co-publish science, they co-fund science, they have a professional relationship, a client. It's really more of a client service provider relationship than it is a regulator and industry relationship. So, and working very closely together, they developed a new diagnosis, a different diagnosis that conveniently found that this disease was not here. And in a number of papers and reports that they published, they said HSMI is not in BC. Okay, very plainly. Meanwhile, this research is being done by another lab, and they come to the conclusion, yes, it is here. And we learn that from internal emails that the distinction between these two diagnoses is that they said, okay, the rest of the world, they say you need clinical signs to make this diagnosis. And that is lesions, microscopic lesions on the heart and the skeletal muscle. Okay, they didn't even collect skeletal muscle until 2013 or 2014. So they completely ignored one half of that diagnosis for years. The heart lesions, they acknowledge that they're there. They know that it's there, but they added a new piece, which is behavioral signs, clinical signs. In other words, are the fish outwardly, are they swimming funny? Are they emaciated? Are they not eating very well? Okay, there are situations where those clinical signs can be present, and the fish has the disease, but the fish may have the disease and not show that stuff. And it depends on a whole bunch of other factors like the temperature in the ocean, salinity, acidification, other environmental factors, like if there are other stressors in the environment, like an algal bloom or parasites, then they may be more likely, just like you or I could be carrying a disease and we don't even know it. And then something significant happens. We have a really stressful event in our life or whatever, and then all of a sudden it kicks in, and then we get really sick, and then you can see, the person's sick. So the international scientists who have set the standard for this disease have been very careful to warn that you do not use clinical signs to make this diagnosis. All you need to do is cut these fish open, take out the heart, take out the skeletal tissue, and put it under a microscope and see, are these lesions here or not? Is it affecting the tissues? And if it is, then it has the disease. And these guys made up a different diagnosis. And of course, in determining whether there's clinical signs, the government is relying on the industry's own reports from their farms. They're not going out there and watching and saying, oh yeah, we see clinical signs. They're calling the farmer. The farm is not calling them. They're just saying, no, nothing to see here. We're taking them at their word. You and I could see how that's there's a conflict there. I mean, you're basically putting the fox in charge of the hen house.
Well, exactly.
But they don't see a problem with that.
Well, did they at least have marine biologists sign off on that new condition, a new behavioral condition that determines their definition of the disease? Did they actually have some scientists sign off on this, or they just came out of the blue with this?
3 groups of scientists that concocted and published science using this diagnosis, which they never disclosed, by the way.
So they didn't disclose
the journal that they published in that they were using a different diagnosis when they said it wasn't here. And the 3 groups represented here are DFO, the provincial lab that I just mentioned, the scientist Gary Marty, who's been working in concert with the industry for years and is now under investigation, and the industry itself. They devised this. So it's industry veterinarians, employees of Marine Harvest and Cermak, etc. In this case, Marine Harvest was very involved. The biggest operator here, Norwegian company.
Well, I'm sure they're biased, right?
So those are the scientists that we're talking about. But the scientists within DFO, you might say, well, they're independent federal government scientists. Well, they're not. I've seen the internal emails and the documents that show just how in bed they are with the industry. I mean, let me put it to you this way, Kevin. When this discovery was made, and these scientists, these very reputable, not cranks, but the top people in their field in the world, okay, when they came to this conclusion, they said they're sure it's here, okay? I get an email, for instance, from an internal aquaculture department manager within DFO saying to another person, they're crafting the press release and how this is going to be presented to the public. And they're watering it down. They're saying, oh, it's just a preliminary or potential diagnosis. And this woman's saying, I've been in touch with our communications department and I've forwarded the concerns of the aquaculture industry and to make tweaks to the press release. And I hope that Friday's release, when it goes up to the public, is that version. Okay. Now, just in case people don't understand, that would be like the Surgeon General is coming out with some new science or a new public statement about science that's been done about smoking and the impacts on health and cancer.
Exactly.
And before they do that, they say, we got a press release here, a draft press release. This is what we're going to say to the people. But let's call Philip Morris first and see if they have any problems with the press release and how they would like it to be worded. That is exactly, what has happened here.
I'm actually stunned. I could not have put this better myself. I mean, you're absolutely completely hit the nail on the head there. Absolutely. My God. Oh.
So, and you could say, this isn't as bad as smoking or whatever. Well, hold on a second. This is salmon, as you understand, in British Columbia. And I think part of the problem is that a lot of DFO and their management decisions and the minister, we haven't had a fisheries minister in Canada from British Columbia since the 1980s in John Fraser. That, in spite of the fact that something like 60% of the aquaculture industry in Canada is in BC. And the biggest wild fisheries still around since the collapse of the cod on the East Coast are in BC. So BC is the game. BC is the most important fishery place in Canada.
Yeah.
So why do we continue having these East Coast or Central Canadian fisheries ministers who don't know and don't really care about what happens to wild fish? And the thing is, it is very important. It's very important to First Nations who've been protesting this industry for years and have been involved in an occupation of the farms and a legal battle over that in recent months. It's important to the entire ecosystem. As you know, the bears, the eagles, the wolves are forests that are fed by the nutrients from the fish when these animals take them in the forest, and the carcasses put all this nitrogen, and that's why we have these huge coastal forests are partly. So you and I both understand, and I think most of your listeners will, that wild salmon is hugely important. There's still twice as many people employed in the wild fishery, even though it's a shadow of its former self, very possibly related to this aquaculture industry coming in here over the years. But it still employs more people. Tourism, we're talking close to 200,000.
Yeah.
Forestry, in the beleaguered forestry and pulp and paper sectors together are 60,000 jobs. Fish farms, 1,400. And sure, there are some spin-off jobs in processing, and there's lawyers and public relations people and other people that service this industry. But it is absolutely paltry compared to what the value of the wild fish, especially when you look at ecotourism and all this bear viewing and whale watching.
Yes.
And all of the things that depend on that. So it is a big deal when our federal regulator and this provincial lab that's helping them do this and the industry are all working together to turn their back on wild fish. And that's what's been going on. And unless the minister, decides to intervene here radically, the problem with regulatory capture is it pervades an entire management structure. It's like a cancer, so that the few scientists that I've mentioned that are actually doing their jobs, they become the exception to the rule. They become the aberration. They're the ones that are marginalized and bullied and given a hard time because they're not part of the culture. The culture is no longer about what it's supposed to be about, which is protecting wild fish. The culture is now about this convoluted business of promoting and protecting a foreign-owned aquaculture business using Atlantic fish that aren't even from here. That's what DFO has become.
Absolutely mind-boggling. And now I got a quick question. Forgive my ignorance here, Damien, but would all this could you save all this if you simply didn't put those smolts back in the wild water? If you kept everything on the land, would that really resolve the problem at that point?
Well, okay, so right now, this is an interesting question. It raises a few issues. So first of all, right now there is a land component to the industry, which is the raising of the smolts in hatcheries. Many people would like to see the entire industry put on land. And it's very much like the renewable energy issue with, you'll hear defenders of pipelines and the oil and gas status quo say, oh, well, you can't replace our energy needs with solar panels, and when it's too expensive, it's too dodgy, whatever. Well, we've seen that in the last decade that certainly they play different roles and they can offer different things, but the cost comparison of various forms of renewable energy has come down dramatically relating to oil and gas. So it's actually not a pie in the sky thing. It's real now, and a lot of countries are doing this. The car industry is moving to electric, blah, blah, blah.
Absolutely.
So we've seen a very similar kind of thing happen in the aquaculture business, where these three big companies, they're all from Norway, they own 90% of the BC industry. Let's call them like they're the Toyota, the GM, and the Ford of the global industry. It's much easier for them, in terms of economies of scale, in terms of the huge capital that they have, to electrify their fleets, or in this case, make the investments to make closed containment, more of a feasible reality than it is for little upstarts like the equivalent of the Teslas or the even smaller companies in the electric car business, entering that field and competing with those giants. So the people who are best positioned to lead this change are the very companies that are doing the open net business today. But like the renewable clean tech sector, already there have been some huge advancements in closed containment. We saw a successful pilot project, Kutera, that happened. The Port McNeil Namgis First Nation was partnered in with some other partners, in Alert Bay, and they showed that it can be done. There's a huge new operation about to open in Florida, which is actually like on a comparable commercial scale. This could very much happen. It needs to happen, and it would present a lot of benefits. We wouldn't be seeing this open exchange of diseases, viruses, parasites, just the waste being dumped into the ocean. I mean, what other agriculture industry is allowed to just, like, are pig farmers allowed to just unmitigatedly dump tons and tons of their animals' feces into the Fraser River every day? I know a lot of people complain there's far too much of that going on, but we do have some laws. These guys just just falls right through the nets, and it's gone. And it's I think this is part of why the industry is so reluctant to change, because they have these free externalities that we give them.
Yes,
we charge them virtually nothing for their ocean tenures and leases. We charge them virtually nothing for in terms of like the kind of comparison on land would be stumpage fees for forestry, or the unnage fees that we charge these guys is like a few dollars a ton. So we're not getting a lot of provincial or federal revenue from this. They're able to dump their waste. They get a free meal too, right? Like feed is a big issue. They have to capture anchovies and sardines and krill from around the world, and at least a couple of pounds of that to grow 1 pound of wild fish. So this is a net protein loss. We're actually depleting our oceans to grow these farmed fish. But they are also supplementing their feed by all the wild fish that swim into their nets. And for many years, they had big lights on in their nets, which is illegal in commercial wild fisheries. But they were allowed to do this. And you know what happens when you turn a light on? It's like a bug, moth to a flame.
That's right.
Fish will be attracted by it. And they very deliberately had all these giant lights. I mean, at the size of your head, one of these light bulbs. And if you have as big a head as I do, and they would attract, bycatch, herring and other fish that would swim in there and feed the fish. So there's all these freebies that the industry has been receiving from being in the open ocean like this, and so them moving on to land, we're going to have to tweak some of these levers, take away some of this free stuff, and give them some incentives to move on land. But it's also, there's a lot of benefits, because you can drive a truck in there and pick up the product and take it to market. People can, rather than being camped out on one of these farms for a couple of weeks, which could be a pretty nasty experience in high seas, and you're away from your family, and now you can get in your vehicle and drive home and see your kids at the end of the day. There are a lot of benefits to the employees of this industry, to the environment, to the the streamlining of the operations, the removal of environmental factors and problems and weather and all sorts of things that have been a challenge to the industry. So this is really, when you talk about, we talked about the problem, but this is the solution. This is where it needs to go. And yes, if we stopped putting these diseased and infected smolts into the ocean, we would be able to control. I'm not saying that there's a certain amount of it that's out there and it's in wild fish to some extent. We're seeing now. There's been some serious damage done here, and I don't know how quickly the wild fisheries would rebound. And I'm not pretending for a second that fish farms are the only thing afflicting the health of our wild fish. And a lot of people will use that argument. The few people that gave negative comments on the stories that I published were saying that kind of a red herring type argument. Well, there's other issues like climate change. I didn't say there wasn't, but you or I, as much as we should be all working together to stem climate change and make better energy decisions going forward, and we do that. We're working on that, but we don't. I'm also looking at the things that we can readily control, and things like habitat destruction from logging, which was an issue for many years, overfishing of the wild stocks, and what kind of pollution and viruses and diseases we allow to go into the ocean. These are things that we can control much easier than we can ocean acidification, climate change, water temperatures, and these sorts of things. So it's not an either or. We need to do everything we can, and it's going to take a lot of hard work together to bring back our wild salmon stocks. But it's so important that we need to do that, and we definitely need to start with the things that we can control. And we've been told this time and time again by the experts that look at this. There are problems there with the fish farms, and we need to deal with them.
Wow. So this is essentially a classic story of privatizing the profit and socializing the externalities. This is exactly what the industry is doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And let's be clear, the privatizing of the profit is going to Norway.
Oh, it's even worse.
$500 million a year BC of value, of farm gate value of the product being grown here.
Mm-hmm.
Very little of that is staying in this community. The only money that's staying here is the relatively low wages that they pay their workers. I mean, we're talking like $20 an hour. I'm not saying that's a terrible job or anything to sneeze at. I live in Campbell River, which is the capital of the industry in Canada. So my community disproportionately benefits in terms of there are a lot of people here. It's a very controversial thing to talk about it because it's kind of hard to do so without knowing a neighbor or somebody that works in the industry. I grant that. I'm not upset with those people, and I'm not saying they shouldn't have a job.
Yeah.
I'm saying that we could do it on land and they would still have a job, but it wouldn't be affecting the wild fishermen's jobs, and it wouldn't be affecting the whale watching companies and bear viewing companies and all the other people that work in this part of the world who also need to have their jobs.
Exactly.
So,
in a quick conclusion, Damien, with the new government coming in, the new NDP government in British Columbia, and they recently just banned a trophy bear hunt. Do you feel positive about the future of this? Do you think people are starting to wake up to this issue, or do you think that people are still way asleep at the switch?
Okay, well, first of all, the provincial government in the last few months has launched 3 investigations into the industry. One to do with, it was a very controversial issue. Many of your listeners will have seen this on Facebook and other places in the mainstream media, the dumping of blood water from 2 processing plants. And this happens at many other plants. This is at the end when the fish is harvested from the farm. They take it back to land and they gut it and fillet it and package it up and send it off to California or China, because we actually don't eat very much of this in BC. Right, so in the process of doing that, there's all this blood and waste, and they were just pumping this right out into Johnson Strait and Clayoquot Sound into very important wild salmon habitat. Some of this blood was tested, and it was found to contain piscine reovirus, so it's not being properly biotreated either. Okay, so they're investigating that. They're investigating the use of harmful chemicals that damage the marine environment and other sea creatures to treat sea lice on these farms, and they're investigating the ethics and operations of this provincial health audit lab that I talked about, reviewing the industry. So there's enough, should be some confidence in the fact that they've launched these investigations, but we'll have to wait to see what happens at the end of that, whether they take any action. The province can control 2 things. They control the audit lab, which basically continued to do the auditing because they were already set up for it. And so even though the responsibility is now DFO's, they've made a contract with the provincial lab. So they're still involved. And they also control the ocean tenures, which is like a lease, but in the ocean, to have the farm out there. And they need that to operate. And a big chunk of these tenures, in particular in very controversial areas with the First Nations in the Broughton Archipelago area, are coming due in June. So the province has indicated it's going to think long and hard about whether or not to renew those tenures or what conditions they want to add to them. And so we'll see what happens. This is a very important time, not only for the federal DFO and fisheries minister to be hearing from the public as they try to gut this law and change the ability of make it legal for the companies to put diseased and infected smolts into the ocean. That's something that your listeners can really pay attention to and do something and lobby the federal minister not to allow that to happen. But provincially, there are these other issues that the environment minister and the agriculture minister need to be hearing from the public so that they follow through on the promises from those reviews. We saw recently, just quickly in closing, you mentioned the trophy hunt. There was also, they rejected the permit for Ajax Mine, a controversial mine near Kamloops. Both of those events, decisions were announced within days of the very unpopular decision to continue with Site C Dam. And I think that both of those decisions were made to throw a bone to the environmental minded people out there to say, we're not all bad here about the environment, and you should, but the level of political damage that the Site C decision has had, and I can just continue to hear it reverberating from all the people that I talk to, is really significant to the NDP, and it's going to take a lot more than the trophy hunt regulations or a mine here or there for them to restore public confidence in their government in terms of resource and environmental management. And so one place where they are particularly vulnerable and could be pushed to do things that they haven't in the past is around the management of these fish farms and the impacts on our wild fish. So they should really be hearing about this, and people who are really upset about what happened with Site C should use that as leverage to say, hey, if you want to even think about getting my vote next time around, you better do it. You know, you got to do 10 things right from here on out. And one of those things has to be, you know, the way that you approach these tenures for the fish farms. Some of them, or all of them, should not be renewed. And you need to really crack down on the shoddy work that's being done at this provincial lab and make sure that if we have a role in the regulation of the industry, that we're doing it properly at the provincial level.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So write to your MLA and write to your MP. Absolutely. Go and let them know what you feel.
I would say not just your MLA and MP, but to the ministers. So write to George Heyman, the Environment Minister, write to Lana Popham, who's the Agriculture Minister in BC, and write to Dominic LeBlanc, who's the MP, or who's the Minister of Fisheries federally.
Fantastic. Damien, thank you so much for explaining this to our audience today. But the mic is all yours, my friend. Be shameless, plug yourself, go right ahead. Where can they find you?
Well, I would just encourage your listeners to go to thetie.ca to check out this 2-part series that I've just published. And I continue to, even with the loss of my co-founder of the Common Sense Canadian, Rafe Mayer, who passed away tragically this past fall, continuing to publish. I've done a lot of work around Site C Dam in recent months, taking a critical look at the frankly nonsensical economic arguments that the government made to continue on with the project. And I interviewed some of the top independent experts on the subject, former CEO or the former head of the Joint Review Panel into Site C Dam, Harry Swain, and just looking at the comments made by other very knowledgeable experts who really kind of undermined the reasons that the NDP gave for continuing with this project. So you can find that at commonsensecanadian.ca.
Perfect. Damien, before I let you go, I gotta have to say, hi, I'm Damien Gillis, and I took a left to the valley.
Hi, I'm Damien Gillis, and I took a left to the valley.
And that was our friend Damien Gillis, keeping an eye on the wild salmon. What a story! I'm shocked to hear all this stuff, that this fight that's happening right in our backyard, and most of us don't know anything about it. We'll absolutely have to keep an eye on it, and we'll have to have him back. And if you really care about your wild salmon, because you really should, you know, the lifestyle of the salmon, it's not just a fish. You know, where the fish dies after it spawns, it feeds nature. It's a huge source of life. The animal, if that animal disappears, it's one of those pivot species. If that animal disappears for some reason, then you have a whole lot of species that don't rely on it. They're going to be in trouble. So let's do something about this. Let's not have this happen. Well, thank you so much, guys, for being with me on the show today. You can find us at leftofthevalley.com. You can find us on Facebook, on Twitter at LATV. You can send us an email at leftatvalley@outlook.com.
And put money in the envelope.
Put money in the envelope, send your envelopes, and you can play it to Nancy on the 3rd floor.
Or you could support us on Patreon, which I'm setting up right now.
If you have better things to do, you could just not look us up.
Send us some messages of what you guys would want as rewards for Patreon.
Yeah, let's do that.
Yeah.
Our 3 listeners, I'm sure, will be happy to send us about $1 a month.
Hey,
we got to start somewhere.
That's right.
$3 adds up. We can buy better equipment.
It totally does.
Bring a better show.
Coming up next week, we'll be talking to our old friend Michael Shermer about his new book. That's really interesting. And at the end of the month, we'll be talking to Phil Ferguson.
I'm so excited.
Dynamite lineup, as always.
The aptly named The Phil Ferguson Show. We'll be talking about Bitcoin.
If you ever want to listen to a show that makes you like, oh my gosh, I have to get better with my money.
And on the 3rd of February, our old friend, we have a lot of old friends.
We have a lot of old friends.
Yeah. Old people.
Chris the Christian Christensen.
He's coming back
on the show.
I haven't seen him.
What's he talking about?
He's just going to talk about how he feels as a Christian.
Oh.
So we're just going to have a nice, interesting conversation.
I hope I'm
with him.
here.
And he's going to bring his friend Zach too.
I hope
you're here too. I hope I'm here just to witness this.
Now we're not going to tear his head off.
Oh, no, absolutely not.
I'm just going to ask simple questions.
Exactly.
Are we going to have a conversion?
No, I have to hand it to Chris for the last, it's 2 or 3 years, Kevin, that he's been so willing to share his ideas
Chris
and come on.
Chris and I have had some good conversations in person.
Yeah. He is a very good
Talking to a Christian with Chris Christensen. Can he be more Christian than that?
I think we helped him all through seminary, actually.
Yes.
And of course, on the 10th, we'll be talking to David Fitzgerald about his latest book. And also our old friend Luke Fevern. Remember Luke from Alberta?
Was I here?
Yes, you were. We did a part 1 show, and you were supposed to talk about the school.
Yes.
The religion getting into school.
Yes, I remember
He's going to be coming back.
Oh, good.
Nice.
Good.
And I'm also working on getting these people from the Biomimicry Institute to come and talk
that is
about
going to be so
biomimicry.
interesting. I'm so excited.
Good
I have some interesting questions I want to ask them.
Yes, we all have a lot of interesting questions.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Thank you so much for all this. Until next time.
Yes. Oh, read Harry Potter.
She had to slip it in there. All right, see you guys.
I'm an atheist. Now let me take a sec, don't mean it sounds so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that thousands of children are raped by priests, and since they're holy men of God, they get away scot-free, and the Pope does his very best to keep it on the hush. Don't wanna affect business, he loves money too much. We know that they love the kids, but how the fuck can we protect them while they planning to molest them? We teaching them to respect them.
Fuck that.
The system is broke down, working backwards, and the only action or tactic I plan to practice now is to attack them. The parties of God's hands are bloodstained, millions of murders by believers, and they're all in God's name. And let me take a sec, don't mean to sound so hateful, but I swear to God, pun intended, I find it disgraceful that many atheists are told to be quiet. You're not alone, speak your mind, time to let it be known. I'm proud to be an atheist, a skeptic, a non-believer, an infidel, a heathen. I call it how I see it. I say it's ignorance, and you just call it faith and unsubstantiated claims. That's something to be ashamed. I'm an atheist.